Hello and welcome to a very special interaction today with a person many have called the superhero of this global financial crisis. I'm talking, of course, about Jamie Dimon, the head of JPMorgan. Now, Jamie Dimon has ensured that JPMorgan is today not only the biggest bank in America with a market cap of about $150 billion, but is also one of the safest banks on the planet today. Mr. Dimon not only avoided JPMorgan taking on subprime loans and all those derivatives, in fact, which is what makes it so different from all the other banks and so much safer, he's also acquired many major banks and firms recently and in the recent past as well, to make JPMorgan the biggest bank in America. Jamie Dimon is also reported to be at the heart of negotiations with the US government and has been involved in many of the government's rescue plans. So there's no one else that knows about this crisis and what to do about it better than Mr. Dimon. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
It's a great pleasure for you to have me here.
Mr. Dimon, you've been at the heart of these negotiations with Mr. Paulson and others. Difficult times, right? How bad do you rate the current crisis? The worst in 100 years, 80 years? How bad is it?
Well, you know, as a student of history, I think it's probably the worst since the Great Depression. You know, but we've had a lot of financial crises. I think they happen every 5 or 10 years, but this clearly transcends what we've seen in the internet bubble in 01 or the emerging market LTCM crisis in 97. So I would go as far back as the Great Depression. I don't expect it to be that bad, but that would be the worst.
So worst in about 80 years. Now, I'm not going to ask you when it's going to end. That's probably the most difficult thing to predict. But for investors, if you could tell us what key indicators, what signs should they look out for that the crisis is coming to an end and a recovery is on its way? What are the key things one should look out for?
Right. So I think one of the key things you've already seen taking place, which is the central banks and the governments of the world taking very aggressive, bold, and often creative, never done before kind of actions to try to ameliorate and mitigate the situation. So I think when they get engaged like that, that's a pretty positive sign. And if you're optimistic, I think you could think that that will start to work over time. You're starting to see it now as LIBOR rates come down. The real sign to look at normalized markets will be that companies, again, will be able to borrow in the marketplace. They're going to pay more for money. People will demand less leverage in certain companies, but that you'll be able to raise and refinance the balance sheets in the ordinary course of business.
So for an average, say, one of our viewers, an average investor, what should he look out for? It's been difficult to know when companies start borrowing and lending again and confidence comes back. What are the signs that an average person should look out for?
I think the average person would look at, you know, less volatile markets.
Right.
You'll stop reading about financial crisis in the paper every single day.
Right.
This will become kind of less and less of an issue, and you'll start to see more normal functioning of rates and deposits, and even the news will spend a lot less time on it.
Right. We're looking forward to that, actually. Now, we've seen this, as you say, kind of unprecedented package from the US government and from many governments. You've seen it now, different varieties of it in different parts of the world. Which policies do you think are actually going to have an impact, and which ones are a little less impactful than we had hoped?
Right. So I think the ones which I know will have a big impact, and some we're not sure, but the ones I know, guaranteeing deposits, which a lot of countries have done, is very impactful, because it immediately makes it that anyone who invests in a bank knows that they're going to get their money back. So that's a big one. I think recapitalizing the banks, we know it's going to work somehow, because, you know, if some banks would have had to cut back on lending, there's less of a need to do that, and other banks who really didn't need the money can use it for more aggressive purposes. So we don't know exactly how it's going to work, because it's kind of unprecedented, but I do think that'll be helpful. So those two things are probably the two most important things that they've done.